Hey, what's up, Twitter? All right, so this one is composing. Um, where do I start? Excuse my hair. I'm in Thrasher DIY mode. This is my little thing. I'm painting and stuff right now. Anyway, so composers. This one is critical, man. Like there's a lot of critical stuff in all this, and this is one that even higher up directors don't get right, and especially like the lower level directors. If they're like brand new directors on indie films and so forth, they get it wrong, man. And let's go through it. Let's reverse engineer it so that we see it from the and just off the cuff. All of this is off the cuff. Let's reverse engineer it so that we understand what the composers are thinking, because that will help you. The first thing that people do wrong, directors, is they don't give the composer the script, and it's like think of when did you get financed, like, and that would be a question I would have. When did you get financed? Oh, you got financed a year ago. You knew you were greenlit a year ago, and you're just now handing me, a locked picture. And when do you need music? Oh, in a week, 2 weeks, whatever. No, like that is a bad strategy. That's bad planning, and but it's typical. Like, people do not think of like, oh yeah, I need music for this shit. Yes, you do. Like, that's an above the line critical player, and what else about it? Think of it as a department head, and a lot of people don't think of that. They think of it just like, oh, it's kind of like needle drop, right? Like, I just rip stuff off of the CD or whatever, and that's what it is to them. It's like two tracks. Like, oh, let's just pull that, dump it in. There you go, editor. You can mix to that, or you can edit to that, and then they're like, okay, great. And that's as far as they think of it. But no, it's a department head. The composer is a department head. How many people do they have under them? So that you have the composer, you have and there's so many layers to this. You have the composer, you have under him, her, whatever, them. You have the orchestrator, you have if you're going live, then you have however many live musicians, 60, whatever, 30 to 60, something like that. Under them, you have the recording engineer, you have the mixer, you have the conductor, if they're not going to conduct themselves. A bunch of assistants. I mean, all said and done, it's probably like 60, 70 people sometimes. It's a huge thing. And so to not think about that as a department is wrong. Think of it, music is a department, and I'm gonna hire the person because I love their music, and that's it. And don't do the thing where it's like every composer hates when you're like, unless you're gonna temping, unless you're gonna temp their music into your stuff. Nah. Because we already know the director is gonna fall in love with the temped in music. Do we know what that is, temped in music? So it's basically music that you stole from another movie or whatever. What are some that people temp a lot? American Beauty is probably really high up on the list. Shawshank Redemption, pretty much everything written by Thomas Newman, and whatever else. And then that makes me I have so many fucking ideas, I can't get them all out. It makes me think of what do you call that? An acquaintance of mine did Saw, and how did the director come to him? The director said, "Listen, here's what we want. Out of one speaker, they played Nine Inch Nails. Out of the other speaker, they played Wagner. Right? So boom, that's what we want." And a composer is like, "I get it, great." And by the way, Charlie Clouser was in Nine Inch Nails, so he's clearly going to get it more than most composers because I was in that band. I know I wrote that stuff. Great. So that mixed with that, great. I get it. You know, and that's how the Saw soundtrack happened, and it's fucking awesome. It's amazing. And those are the types of things you should be doing as a director. Like, not coming to composers saying like, hey, I finished my movie, you know, I need a soundtrack immediately. And, you know, I don't want to pay any money. And you got to come out of your own pocket for shit. And like, dude, what is this? Like, did you just stop giving a fuck about your movie? Like, that's what it feels like to a composer. Like, it just feels like you're lazy. You know, you could have go to the composer once you lock your script. Once it's locked and you have financing, that's when you look for a composer. You don't look for a composer, you know, once you're standing in the editing bay. No, script is locked. Boom. And now the composer can start doing motifs or motives, however you want to say it. And here, how about this? You know, even if it's not going to be used, you know, I get it. It's like, this ain't Star Wars, so you don't need a motif for every single character. But, you know, if you go to the composer early, they can start building that shit, and they're probably happy to. Like, great, you're including me in enough time where I can think about it. The worst job I ever had, most rush, was they had studio movie. They had two lead composers, and the lead composers hired 3 other composers, ghosting, and they had 4 Pro Tools rigs, on the scoring stage, and everything written is going in. Like, so basically they're saying like, hey, you gotta, because we got 1 week to score this fucking thing, studio movie, and basically whatever you write goes in, so it has to be perfect. So, you know, it's like the stress level is like, dude, every inch of music I write has to be fucking perfect. Like, you guys didn't budget for time. So I'm thinking, all the composers are thinking, you're fucking stupid. You could have done this, you know, 6 months ago or whatever. So you got to be thinking about that. The other part of it is, there's so much to this. The other part of it is, directors, they will temp music from other movies, and they fall in love with the temp. You know, they give it to the editor. Hey, cool, edit to that, and they fall in love with it. And then it leaves no room for the composer. And we're just like, dude, like, why would you do this to yourself? You have the opportunity, think it through. Who are the rad directors who opened it up for composers? Let's go through it. Brick, right? Let them do whatever they wanted. Great. People are going to copy that. Richard Kelly, Donnie Darko, great. That's really copied. Who was it? Sam Mendes in American Beauty. American Beauty is probably the most copied score ever. Most temped score ever. And if you don't know what temping is, then you probably should read some books or whatever. What else? There's a lot. Like I said, like anything by Thomas Newman, you know, all that kind of stuff. Danny Elfman, you know, Hans Zimmer, all that stuff. But then directors don't realize on the lower level, hey, you cannot afford those people, so do not fall in love with that music. Go find new composers. I keep fucking that up. New composers, and it can fit your movie like a glove, like only your movie. Why would you want to rip off someone else's music and try to make it your own? When we're writing that, by the way, we're thinking, you're stupid. That's what we're thinking. Composers, we're like, this is a dumb director who doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. And the other thing directors do is they will say, you're like, what kind of music do you want? And they're like, I'll know it when I hear it. And that tells us bullshit, dude. That is the dumbest thing that every director says. Always. We know that. And what it means is, I have no fucking clue what I want. None. And so you're asking the composer basically to, hey, I don't know what I want. So why don't you just write 20 different versions and for the same price? And the composer's like, fuck you. No, I'm not going to write 20 different versions. How about you go off and think about it? Think, it's your movie, dude. Think about what you want and then come back to me. And another thing they do is like describe shit as like, hey, the composer's like, hey, what do you want? And they're like, I want it to sound blue. And you're like blue, like sad? And they're like, no. And you're like, blue, like cold? And they're like, no, like blue. And you're like, I don't know what the fuck that means. What does that mean? And they're like, blue, like the color blue. And you're like, dude, what? Like the color, like I don't have gels I can put on my music. What the fuck is that? Like, no. Like, why is your vocabulary jumping out the window as soon as you start talking to composers? No, use your language and fucking tell me what you want, and then I can write that, shit like that. Like it once you get into like, are you gonna do that with like an editor? Like, you're like, oh shit, I shot my movie. Now I need an editor. Now I guess I'll have to look for one. I can't imagine you doing that. I think you would just be like, cool, I got my editor set up. Everyone above the line should be pre-set up. And everyone knows what's going on. That's how you do a good movie. That's what a director does. Anything else I can think of as far as scoring? Hire someone that you love their music, and you're not listening to their music to be like, that's the piece that's gonna go in my thing. Even if it's a sample that they wrote, don't look at it like that. Look at it like, do I like their vibe? Do I like their vibe? Great. I'm gonna hire them and I'm gonna let them go and do their thing. And another thing to think about too is, I was on a thing and the director came over and listened to playback, and he started laughing at the cue. And it was during a heavy moment, and I'm like, that kind of felt fucked up. I'm like, dude, this ain't supposed to be funny. And why are you laughing? And he's like, it just doesn't fit. Like, it doesn't fucking work. This is stupid. Kind of like that. I'm like, I don't know. I think it works. And the producer was there too and said, I think it works too. Actually, I think you're wrong. And then so the director was like, let me think about it. And I said, yeah, like sit on it for a minute and see if it hits you. Don't be rash if you're a director. If you're not hitting it right away, think about it for a minute. Because I've gotten fired off movies where it didn't hit them immediately, and then like, cool, you're fired, and they wouldn't even talk to me about any of it. And it's like, that's stupid. And the reason it's stupid is because everyone knows, all composers know, they're the last one who can be fired. We know that. I'm not a composer anymore. Fuck that. But composers know they are the last person who can be fired. Last person in the chain who's above the line, who has artistic, an artistic stamp on it. And so that's when everybody starts panicking, because that's the last person they can fire. And a lot of composers get fired for the wrong reasons, because the director doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. And we see composers, we fucking see through it, and we think you're fucking stupid, because all the big directors, they all, have their composers set up. Christopher Nolan, it's gonna be Hans Zimmer. He already knows that. Do it like that. Like, follow the big boys. That's it. Later.